If you feel guilty every time you're not being productive, this book is basically written for you. We're constantly told to optimize our time, hustle more, cut out waste, and squeeze out value from every spare minute. And Joseph Jebelli is asking a really uncomfortable question. What if that whole mindset is back to front? And the thing you're cutting out, proper rest, is actually what your brain needs most. He's a neuroscientist, and he's not just speaking in abstract theory. Early in the book, he talks about his own family, especially his dad, and how overwork, stress, and never switching off led to serious burnout and depression, with huge consequences for their lives. That personal story sets up the big idea. The way we glorify constant busyness is making us less creative, less happy, and less well. The default mode network. What the brain does when doing nothing. One of the key concepts Jebelli explains is the brain's default mode network. That's the system that switches on when you're not focused on a task, when you're daydreaming, in the bath, out for a walk, staring out the window, or lying in bed letting your mind wander. We usually think of those moments as zoning out or wasting time, but the science says the opposite. During rest, the default network is incredibly active. That's when the brain quietly files memories, connects ideas, works through emotions, and comes up with insights you can't force by sheer concentration. Jebelli's point is that this idle mode is not a bug, it's a feature of how a healthy human brain works. He contrasts that with what he calls the executive network, the work mode that handles focus, problem-solving, and tasks. Modern life keeps us locked in executive mode. Emails, meetings, notifications, content, constant inputs. The more we crowd out rest, the less chance the default network gets to do its deep background work. And over time that shows up as brain fog, stress, and feeling emotionally frayed. Rest as essential maintenance, not laziness. From there, the book works to flip your emotional script about rest. Instead of seeing rest as lazy or indulgent, Jebelli frames it as essential maintenance for your brain, like sleep, but while you're awake. He pulls together research showing that intentional rest and mind wandering support creativity, problem-solving, memory consolidation, emotional processing, and resilience to stress. That includes everything from improved mood and better mental health to longer-term impacts on brain health and even life expectancy. He also connects this science to cultural traditions, things like walks, siestas, contemplative practices, and unstructured play, and argues that older cultures often understood intuitively what neuroscience is now confirming, that making room to do nothing is part of a well-lived life. How overwork breaks us, Jebelli's personal angle. The book isn't just lab results, it's also a warning from lived experience. Jebelli describes his father as a driven man who worked long hours at a job he hated until he simply couldn't do it anymore and was diagnosed with severe depression when Jebelli was a child. That experience imprinted on him how destructive a life of constant push and zero recovery can be. Later, as an adult and a scientist, he finds himself slipping into the same pattern. Always on, overachieving, overscheduled, and quietly falling apart. The turning point is when he realizes he has to reverse course, to deliberately step back from overwork, reintroduce rest, and see what happens. As he does that, his own well-being improves, which becomes part of the narrative thread of the book. This isn't just theoretically good for you, it actually changes how your life feels day to day. Practical ways to activate the resting brain. A big part of the book is practical. How do you actually give your brain the kind of rest it needs? Jebelli offers everyday strategies that are simple, but for a lot of us, surprisingly hard to make space for. 1. Unstructured walks, especially in nature. Walking around without a podcast, without an agenda, just letting your minds drift. 2. Long baths or showers, where you allow yourself to zone out instead of scrolling. 3. Naps and proper sleep routines. 4. Gentle exercise, not just for fitness, but as a rhythm that encourages mind wandering. And 5. Meditation or quiet contemplation, not always as a strict productivity hack, but as a way of regularly dropping out of constant doing. He stresses that the key is intention. You're not resting if you simply swap one kind of stimulation for another, for example, doom scrolling or cramming more content into your brain. True rest means lowering cognitive load enough that the default network can switch on. What Jebelli wants you to take away. By the end of The Brain at Rest, the message is pretty clear. If you never stop, your brain never gets to do some of its most important work. The book's core takeaways are: rest is not the opposite of productivity. It's part of the mechanism that makes deep thinking, creativity, and emotional balance possible. The default mode network, the brain at rest, is a fundamental part of being human, and starving it makes us more stressed, less original, and ultimately less well. Simple, low-tech practices like walking, daydreaming, baths, time in nature, and moments of stillness are not luxuries. They're tools to keep your brain and your life in good working order. In other words, the book is an invitation to stop treating rest as something you earn only after you've done enough, and to start seeing it as something you need first if you want your brain and your life to actually work properly.